In a forgotten corner of the world, where the sun rose over dusty fields and hope seemed like a distant memory, there lived a young man named Ethan. He shared a humble clay house with his father Thomas and their devoted dog Bruno. They had almost nothing by the world's standards, just a handful of chickens that barely laid eggs, a small cornfield that struggled to grow, and walls held together by dried mud and prayer. But within those fragile walls lived something the richest men couldn't buy, a love so deep and a faith so strong that poverty felt like just a temporary condition, not a permanent sentence. Every single evening, as the golden light faded and darkness crept across their tiny farm, father and son would kneel together on the hard ground. Thomas, with his weathered hands clasped tightly, would look into his son's eyes and say words that would echo through Ethan's life forever. "Son, I won't lie to you. The life we live isn't easy. We go to bed hungry sometimes. We wake up not knowing where our next meal will come from. But listen to me carefully. If you work with every ounce of strength you have, and if you trust in God even when everything around you is falling apart, He will open doors you didn't even know existed." Ethan didn't just hear these words, he absorbed them into his very soul. He dreamed constantly of a better future, not just for himself, but for others who suffered like they did. And through it all, Bruno was there, not just as a pet, but as a living symbol of loyalty that never wavers, even when the whole world turns its back. But life has a cruel way of testing the very faith we hold most dear. One morning, Thomas woke up different. His hands, which had worked the fields for decades, began to shake uncontrollably. His voice, once strong and reassuring, became weak and uncertain. Day by day, the sickness consumed him like a shadow swallowing light. Ethan watched helplessly as the man who had been his entire world slowly faded away. He carried his father home on his back when Thomas could no longer walk, feeling the weight of not just his father's body, but the crushing reality that he was losing the only person who truly understood him. Bruno walked beside them in silence, his usual playfulness replaced by a sadness that animals feel but cannot express in words. Every night, Ethan prayed with a desperation that tore at his heart. He begged God for just one more day, one more conversation, one more moment. But sometimes, prayers are answered in ways we don't expect. On a cold night that Ethan would never forget, Thomas squeezed his son's hand with what little strength remained and whispered his final words. "My son, listen to me one last time. When a man loses everything, his home, his money, his health, even the people he loves, but keeps his faith intact, he hasn't lost anything at all. He still has everything that truly matters." Then, Thomas closed his eyes and left this world, leaving Ethan alone with grief so heavy it felt like drowning. Ethan buried his father under the big tree where they used to rest together during hot afternoons, where they had shared dreams and laughter. Bruno stayed by that grave for hours, whimpering softly, refusing to leave, as if his loyalty extended even beyond death. Just when Ethan thought his suffering had reached its limit, fate delivered another devastating blow. Fire, merciless and consuming, swept through their small farm one dry night. It devoured everything: the house his father built, the cornfield they had planted together, the few possessions that held precious memories. Ethan stood there watching his entire world turn to ash and smoke, and something inside him broke. He fell to his knees in the dirt, looked up at the empty sky, and screamed with all the pain in his heart. "Why, God? Why do you take everything from me? What have I done to deserve this?" The silence that followed was deafening, but then he felt something warm against his hand, Bruno, licking his fingers, pressing close to him, reminding him that he wasn't completely alone. In that moment of absolute darkness, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. He would leave. He would walk away from this place of death and loss. But he made a solemn promise to his father's grave. I will return one day. I don't know how, but I will come back stronger. With nothing but a small cloth bag, a wooden walking stick, and Bruno by his side, Ethan began walking. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay. They walked for days under the burning sun and through cold nights. They slept on hard ground under trees that offered little shelter. They drank from rivers and shared tiny pieces of stale bread that Ethan had saved. His feet bled, his body ached, but something in his heart refused to give up. That voice of his father kept echoing, "Never lose your faith." One evening, exhausted and barely able to take another step, they reached a small village. Ethan thought maybe, finally, he would find kindness. But when he approached the villagers, asking for just a little food or a place to rest, they looked at him with cold eyes. "We don't help beggars," one man said. "Keep moving," said another. Door after door closed in his face. The rejection stung worse than hunger. But just as darkness fell completely, Ethan spotted an old, abandoned house on the edge of the village, hidden partially by overgrown vines and surrounded by an eerie silence. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but it had a roof, and that was more than he had now. That night, sitting in that dark, dusty room with only Bruno for warmth, Ethan did something that most people wouldn't understand. Instead of cursing his fate, instead of giving up on the God who seemed to have forgotten him, he prayed. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered into the darkness. "I have lost my father. I have lost my home. I have lost everything the world says matters. But I'm still breathing, my heart still beats, and I still have this faithful friend beside me. So thank you." It was a prayer born not from abundance, but from the deepest kind of faith, the kind that exists even when there's no logical reason for it to exist. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A kind farmer named Pedro saw Ethan walking through the village and offered him work. "You look like someone who knows hard work," Pedro said with a warm smile. "I can pay you fairly and give you food." It wasn't much, but to Ethan, it felt like a miracle. For the first time in weeks, he had hope. As days passed and Ethan continued working for Pedro, the villagers began asking questions. "Where are you staying?" they asked with curiosity. "In the old house near the woods," Ethan replied simply. The moment those words left his mouth, the villagers' faces went pale. They looked at each other with fear in their eyes. "You're staying there," one woman gasped. "That house is cursed. Everyone knows a spirit guards a hidden treasure in that place. Many men have entered seeking the gold, but they all ran out screaming, seeing terrible things. Some went mad. You should leave immediately." But Ethan just smiled gently. "I'm not there for treasure," he said. "I'm just there for peace." The villagers thought he was either very brave or very foolish. But that night, Ethan discovered the truth behind their warnings. The air in the old house suddenly turned ice cold, even though it was a warm night outside. Bruno, who had been sleeping peacefully, jumped up and began growling at something Ethan couldn't see at first. Then, slowly, a shadow materialized in the corner of the room, a figure that seemed made of darkness and ancient pain. A spirit. Ethan's heart pounded so hard he thought it would burst from his chest, but he didn't run. The spirit spoke with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Young man, why are you in my house? Do you seek my treasure like all the others? Do you come with greed in your heart?" Ethan's whole body trembled with fear, but he forced himself to speak with complete honesty. "No, sir. I don't even know what treasure you're talking about. I lost my father to sickness. I lost my home to fire. I lost everything that once mattered to me. I'm not here for gold or riches. I just needed a place to rest my head and a roof to keep the rain off. That's all." The room fell silent. The spirit studied him for what felt like an eternity. Then something remarkable happened. The anger in the spirit's presence began to fade, replaced by something almost like sadness mixed with respect. "You are different," the spirit finally said, its voice softer now. "So many have come before you, all with greed poisoning their hearts, all demanding what they believed they deserved. But you came with nothing, asking for nothing, carrying only faith and a pure heart. The treasure you truly seek cannot be found in gold or jewels. It is the blessing that comes from God Himself, given to those who remain faithful when faithfulness seems foolish." Mist. In its place sat a small wooden chest, old and covered in dust. With shaking hands, Ethan opened it. Inside lay ancient coins that gleamed in the moonlight and jewelry that sparkled with a beauty that took his breath away. A real treasure, more wealth than he had ever imagined in his entire life. Ethan fell to his knees right there, tears streaming down his face, and whispered through his sobs, "Thank you, Lord. Even when I couldn't see you, even when I thought you had forgotten me, you never left my side. You were preparing this moment all along." Bruno came and rested his head on Ethan's lap, as if he understood that everything had finally changed. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. Ethan didn't use that treasure to become rich and forget his past. He used it to honor his father's memory. He returned to his village and rebuilt his father's house, making it stronger and more beautiful than before. He helped the poor who had no one to help them. He fed the hungry. He gave hope to those who had lost it, just like he once had. Bruno, now growing old but still faithful, stayed by his side through everything, a living reminder that loyalty and love are treasures money can never buy. The villagers who once turned him away now spoke his name with respect and wonder. They told their children, "Remember young Ethan and what he taught us. God doesn't reward the greedy or the proud. He rewards the humble. True treasure doesn't come to those who chase it desperately. It comes to those who never lose their faith, even when losing faith would be the easiest thing in the world." And so, under that same tree where his father was buried, Ethan built a new life, not just for himself, but as a testament to a truth that echoes through every generation. When you have faith, even in your darkest hour, even when everything is taken from you, miracles don't just happen, they find you. Because the greatest treasure isn't what you hold in your hands, it's what you hold in your heart.